The rain poured endlessly that morning, soaking the gray cemetery ground as Ryan Miller stood motionless beside the coffin. The name engraved on the stone read, Thomas Carter, beloved husband and father. Ryan's jaw tightened. Father, he whispered under his breath, the word tasting bitter. People around him whispered condolences, but his mind was somewhere else, not in grief, but in confusion. He didn't cry, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to. Tom had entered his life when Ryan was 12. His real father had left years earlier, and Ryan had always seen Tom as a quiet intruder in his mother's world, a man who tried too hard, smiled too kindly, and called him son when Ryan never asked for it. Now, as the coffin lowered into the wet earth, Ryan felt nothing but an emptiness he couldn't explain. The priest's words blurred in the drizzle. He was a good man, humble and selfless. Good man, maybe, but to Ryan, he was just a man who tried to fill a space that didn't belong to him. After everyone left, Ryan stood alone by the grave, rain dripping from his coat. For the first time, he noticed a small folded note placed beside the headstone, with his name written in Tom's familiar shaky handwriting. He didn't pick it up, not yet, just stared at it, heart uneasy. Something about that letter felt heavier than the silence surrounding him. As thunder rolled in the distance, Ryan turned away and walked toward his car. But the letter, that small piece of paper, stayed burned in his mind. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the world still felt gray. Ryan drove down the long, cracked road toward the edge of town, where Tom's small, single-story house sat quietly at the end of Willow Creek Lane. The old maple tree in the yard still swayed gently, its leaves brushing the rusted pickup truck Tom had driven every day for 20 years. Ryan had been here countless times as a boy, storming out after arguments, slamming doors, yelling, "You're not my dad," before running to his room. He could still feel the echo of those words floating in the air, still sharp and cruel. Now, the house felt frozen in time. As Ryan unlocked the front door, the faint scent of engine oil and coffee greeted him. Tom's scent, mixed with the distant smell of his mother's lavender candle that hadn't been lit in years. He hesitated at the threshold before stepping inside. The living room was just as he remembered. The old brown recliner facing the TV, a faded photograph of his mother on the wall, and the small wooden cross above the doorway. Dust particles floated in the pale morning light, sneaking through the blinds. Ryan placed his coat on the chair and looked around. Silence. A kind of silence that only existed in homes where love once lived. He began sorting through old boxes, bills, tools, photos, and pieces of paper that meant nothing to him but had clearly meant everything to Tom. One box was labeled Ryan's stuff. Ryan frowned, pulling it closer. Inside were things he hadn't seen in years. A crayon drawing of a house with 3 stick figures, a small baseball glove, and a letter from his middle school teacher praising his essay, one Tom must have secretly kept. Ryan's chest tightened. Why would he keep all this? He whispered. As he wandered into the garage, the smell of grease hit him. It was where Tom had spent most of his evenings fixing old cars, humming quietly, sometimes calling Ryan in to lend a hand. Ryan rarely did. He thought it was boring. On the workbench sat Tom's old red toolbox, heavy, scratched, and covered with oil stains. Ryan ran his fingers over the metal lid before opening it. Inside, nestled between wrenches and screwdrivers, was a small folded envelope. His name was written on it again, Ryan. His breath caught, the same handwriting as the letter from the grave, but this one looked older, worn, as if it had been written years ago. Ryan sat down on the stool, heart pounding. For a moment he just stared at it. Memories rushed in. His mother's laughter, Tom teaching him to ride a bike, the night he yelled at him for not being his real dad. He finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The ink was slightly faded, the edges soft with time. Tom's handwriting was shaky but full of care. The first words made Ryan's throat tighten. Dear Ryan, I know you'll probably never call me dad, and that's okay. I never wanted to take anyone's place. I just wanted to be someone who was there when you needed a ride or help with homework or someone to cheer at your game. You don't owe me love, son. I just hope someday you'll understand mine. Ryan froze, his eyes tracing every word. The page trembled in his hands. The more he read, the more he realized this letter wasn't recent. It had been written when Ryan was 16, during the time he was at his worst with Tom. When your mom got sick, I promised her I'd keep you safe no matter what. Even if you hated me for it, I wish I could have told you how proud I was of the man you're becoming. Maybe someday when I'm gone, you'll read this and know you were always my son in every way that mattered. Tears slipped down Ryan's face before he could stop them. He hadn't cried at the funeral, but now the dam broke. The old garage, the smell of oil, the creak of the stool, everything around him blurred. For the first time in years, he saw Tom not as an intruder, but as the man who quietly loved him when no one else did. Ryan folded the letter carefully and held it against his chest. The silence around him was no longer heavy. It was peaceful, like Tom was there, quietly watching, smiling that same small, patient smile he always did. And for the first time, Ryan whispered the word he never had the courage to say out loud, "Dad." The evening sun dipped low, painting the garage walls with a soft amber glow. Ryan sat on the cold floor beside Tom's toolbox, the letter still clutched in his hands. His eyes were red and tired, but his heart felt strangely light, like he had just unlocked a truth that had been waiting for him for years. After a long silence, he wiped his tears and stood up, scanning the room again. Every small detail now seemed to breathe with new meaning. The old radio still on the shelf, the oil-stained rag folded neatly beside the bench, the half-repaired bike in the corner. Tom's world, a world built quietly around him. Ryan noticed a small wooden box on the top shelf, tucked behind a stack of rags. He pulled it down, coughing as dust rose into the fading light. Inside were keepsakes, things his mother had once cherished, an old silver locket, a faded photo of the three of them at a county fair, and a hospital bracelet with his mother's name engraved, Margaret Miller Carter. His hands trembled as he lifted the photo. His mother was laughing, her arm around Tom's shoulder, Ryan standing awkwardly in front of them, a teenage scowl on his face. He remembered that day. He'd been angry that Tom came along, angry that his mother called it Family Day. But now, looking at the picture, he saw something he had missed all those years. Tom's hand resting protectively on his shoulder, gentle and fatherly. Ryan turned the photograph over. On the back, written in faint blue ink, were the words, "He promised me he'd always take care of you, no matter how hard you made it for him." "Mom," Ryan froze. His eyes widened as the words sank in. Suddenly, the whole weight of the past hit him like a storm. The cold dinners, the slammed doors, the unspoken apologies. His mother had trusted Tom with the one thing that mattered most to her, him. Beneath the photo was another folded piece of paper. His heart pounded as he unfolded it. It was another letter. Shorter this time, Tom's handwriting a little shakier. "Margaret made me promise to protect you, Ryan. Not because she doubted you, but because she knew how life can be, how lonely it gets when the people we love are gone. I failed in a lot of ways. I didn't always know how to reach you, but I kept my promise to her every single day." Ryan pressed the letter to his chest, his shoulders shaking. He could almost hear his mother's voice, gentle, loving, telling him to forgive, to see what had been in front of him all along. He looked around the garage again, this time not as a stranger, but as a son walking through his father's memories. Every tool, every stain, every quiet corner carried Tom's touch. The old man had kept his word, silently, faithfully, without ever asking for gratitude. As Ryan turned off the light and stepped outside, the evening sky was streaked with pink and orange. The world felt still, almost sacred. He looked back at the house, small, worn, but full of love he had refused to see. "Thank you," he whispered to the fading light, his voice cracking. "I get it now." For the first time since the funeral, Ryan smiled, not out of happiness, but out of peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you finally understand what love really looks like. Not in words, but in quiet promises kept. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. The letters lay on his nightstand, illuminated by the dim yellow glow of the bedside lamp. The words played over and over in his mind like an echo he couldn't turn off. "I kept my promise to her every single day." He lay back, staring at the ceiling, and slowly, memories began to surface. Faint at first, like shadows through fog, but clearer with every heartbeat. He remembered being 16, standing in the school parking lot after football practice, drenched in sweat and anger. His coach had yelled at him. His teammates laughed when he missed the catch, and when Tom pulled up in his old blue pickup to pick him up, Ryan had snapped, "I told Mom I don't need you driving me around." Tom hadn't said a word. He just nodded quietly, drove home in silence, and left Ryan's favorite snack, a bag of chips and a cold soda, on his desk later that night. No lectures, no guilt, just a quiet act of care. Then another memory. Christmas Eve, the year Ryan's mom was in the hospital, too weak to decorate. Ryan had locked himself in his room, angry at the world, angry at fate. But when he came out at midnight, he found the entire living room glowing. Tom had stayed up all night decorating alone, hanging every ornament exactly the way Margaret used to. The star on top of the tree shimmered, slightly crooked but perfect in its imperfection. Tom was asleep on the couch, still holding the box of decorations. Ryan had rolled his eyes back then, but now, remembering it, his heart ached. And then the last memory, college graduation. Ryan had refused to invite Tom. He didn't want anyone to think his stepdad raised him, but when he looked into the crowd after after the ceremony, he saw him anyway, standing in the back, in the heat, wearing his old brown jacket, clapping, smiling, not bitter, not hurt, just proud. Ryan covered his face with his hands. Every small thing he had brushed off, every moment he had dismissed as annoying or unnecessary, it all flooded back like a wave of truth. Tom had never stopped trying, never stopped loving. Even when Ryan gave him nothing but silence. He walked to the window and looked out into the quiet street. The town was still, porch lights glowing faintly, crickets singing somewhere in the distance. Ryan's breath fogged the glass as he whispered, "You were there, weren't you, the whole time?" He smiled faintly through his tears. "I just never looked close enough to see it." The night carried a deep stillness, and in that stillness, Ryan finally understood something his mother had always tried to teach him. Love isn't loud. It doesn't always speak in grand gestures or perfect words. Sometimes it just stays, quietly, faithfully. And that realization, simple but heavy, was the beginning of Ryan's healing. The next morning, Ryan woke up early, earlier than he had in months. The letters were still by his bed, their paper wrinkled from his tears. He picked them up gently, slid them into his jacket pocket, and took a deep breath. There was one more place he needed to go. Tom's old mechanic shop on Maple Street. It was a small, humble building tucked behind the gas station, the kind of place that smelled of grease, steel, and memories. The faded sign still read, "Carter's Auto Repair," though the paint had started peeling. As Ryan pulled into the gravel driveway, he noticed a few men working under a hood, wiping their hands with rags, the radio playing faint country tunes in the background. When he stepped out of the car, a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes looked up. Ryan Miller, right?" he asked, a soft smile forming. "Tom's boy?" Ryan hesitated at the word boy, but he nodded. "Yeah, that's me." The man extended his hand. "Name's Hank. Worked with your stepdad for almost 20 years. He paused, his voice dipping slightly. "We're real sorry for your loss. Tom was one of the good ones." Ryan managed a faint nod. "Yeah, I'm just here to pick up some of his things." Hank motioned toward the back office. "Go right ahead, son. His corner's just the way he left it." Ryan walked through the shop, past the smell of oil and burnt rubber, past the sound of wrenches and engines. In the back there was a small wooden desk, cluttered but organized in its own way. A coffee mug with the words, "Muff One Dad," sat on top, chipped at the rim. Ryan froze. He'd never given that mug to Tom, but his mom had. He remembered it now. A birthday gift she had bought from Ryan because he had refused to pick one himself. As Ryan touched the mug, Hank walked in quietly. "He used to drink from that every morning," Hank said softly. "Wouldn't start his day without it." Ryan smiled faintly, eyes misting over. "Yeah, sounds like him." Hank leaned against the door frame. "You know, he talked about you all the time. Not in a bragging way, more like a man proud of something he didn't take credit for." Ryan frowned. "He talked about me?" Hank nodded. "Every time you achieved something, a new job, college acceptance, even your first car, he'd tell us with that quiet grin. Said, 'That boy's gonna do great things one day.'" Ryan's throat tightened. "He never told me that." "Yeah, well," Hank chuckled softly. "Tom wasn't the kind to say it out loud. He just showed it." Then his expression turned serious. "You know, he refused a big bonus once, about 5 years ago. Boss offered him extra pay to take weekend shifts, but he said no. Told us, 'Ryan's coming home from college. I don't want to miss that.'" Ryan blinked, stunned. He never knew Tom had turned down money for him. That weekend he'd come home, barely said 2 words to Tom, and left the next day. Tom had smiled anyway. "Your old man cared more about being there than anything else," Hank said, his voice warm. "You were his promise, Ryan. He lived for that." Ryan turned toward the window, unable to hold back tears. Outside, the sunlight glinted off the hood of a truck, the same truck Tom used to drive him to school. He could almost see him there, wiping his hands, smiling that quiet, patient smile. For the first time, Ryan didn't feel regret. He felt gratitude, deep, aching gratitude. He looked at Hank and whispered, "I wish I'd told him I knew." Hank put a hand on his shoulder. "You still can, son. Some people hear you even when they're gone." Ryan closed his eyes, nodding slowly. The words sank deep. Maybe love didn't die with the person. Maybe it lingered in the things they built, the people they touched, the promises they kept. As he left the shop, Ryan glanced back at the faded sign once more. The paint might have peeled away, but the name, Carter, still stood strong, just like the man who carried it. And this time, Ryan smiled, a real one. "See you soon, Dad," he whispered, voice trembling but steady. That night, Ryan sat alone in Tom's living room, the house silent except for the faint ticking of the old wall clock. The air felt heavy, filled with memories that seemed to whisper through every corner. He sat on the couch where Tom used to fall asleep watching old westerns, a blanket still folded neatly on the armrest. As he leaned back, his eyes caught the glint of an old cell phone sitting on the coffee table, Tom's old flip phone. Dust had gathered over it, the battery half dead. Ryan picked it up, thumb trembling as he flipped it open. The screen blinked weakly to life, showing a few saved contacts and unread notifications. He scrolled absently at first, not sure what he was looking for, until he saw it. One saved voicemail. Date: 3 years ago. From Tom Carter. Ryan froze. His heart began to pound, the sound of his own pulse drowning out the quiet of the room. He hesitated, afraid of what he might hear, but something deep inside told him this was the moment he had been unknowingly walking toward all along. He pressed play. There was static first, then that familiar rough voice, trembling a little as it spoke. Hey, Ryan, it's me. I know you're busy, son, and you don't like these calls much, but your mom's birthday's coming up. Thought maybe you'd come by for dinner. I made her favorite pie. Well, tried to. It's not the same without her, you know. Tom chuckled awkwardly, a soft, nervous laugh that broke Ryan's heart. I know you probably won't come, and that's okay. I wanted you to know I'm proud of you, even if I don't say it right, even if you don't want to hear it. I am, always have been. There was a pause, a long, painful one, and then his voice cracked as he whispered, you made your mom proud, Ryan, and you made me proud too. Take care of yourself, kid. That's all I ever wanted. Then silence. Ryan sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, his breath shaky and uneven. The message ended, but Tom's voice lingered, gentle, steady, filled with the love Ryan had refused to see. He buried his face in his hands, sobbing quietly. All those years of distance, of cold silence, of ignored calls, and yet Tom never gave up. Even when Ryan pushed him away, he had reached out one last time, not to ask for love, but to give it. Minutes passed before Ryan finally lifted his head. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered into the empty room, I heard you, Dad. I finally heard you. He played the voicemail again and again, each time the words hit deeper, like medicine and pain at once. Outside, rain began to fall, soft, rhythmic, almost comforting, the same way it had on the day of Tom's funeral. But this time, Ryan didn't see it as sorrow. He saw it as peace, a message from heaven maybe, telling him that love never dies. He leaned back on the couch, holding the phone to his chest. For the first time in years, he felt connected, not through guilt, but through gratitude, through understanding, and as sleep slowly took him, Tom's words echoed softly in his mind. You made me proud, son. Ryan smiled through his tears. I love you too, Dad. The morning sky was pale gray, the kind that carried both calm and sorrow in its light. Ryan parked his car at the edge of the small town cemetery, the same one where Tom was buried just weeks ago. In his jacket pocket, he carried the 2 letters and Tom's old flip phone. His fingers brushed against them with every step, as if they were pieces of both the past and his healing. The gravel crunched beneath his shoes as he walked toward the 2 gravestones, side by side. His mother's headstone was simple, engraved with a small engraving of a flower. Beside it, Tom's was newer, the soil still fresh. Seeing them together now, it somehow felt right. They belonged there, just like they always belonged together. Ryan knelt down, brushing a few fallen leaves off his mother's grave. Hey, Mom, he whispered, his voice soft and trembling. It's been a while. He placed her locket on the grass, the same one he'd found in Tom's garage. I went through his things, he said quietly, his tone breaking. I found your note, the one where you said he promised to take care of me. His eyes filled with tears. He did, Mom. He really did. I didn't see it back then. The wind picked up slightly, brushing through the trees, making the leaves whisper like distant voices. Ryan then took out Tom's letter, the one written for him, and set it down between the 2 graves. He kept his promise, Mom, every single day. He laughed weakly, shaking his head. He never stopped calling me son, even when I acted like he wasn't my father. But he was. He really was. He pulled out the phone next, flipping it open. And he left me a message, a voicemail I never heard until now. His voice trembled. He said he was proud of me. Can you believe that? After all the times I shut him out, ignored him, pushed him away, he was still proud. A tear rolled down his cheek and fell on the phone screen. He smiled sadly. You'd probably say, see, I told you he's a good man. He set the phone gently beside the letters and whispered, I'm leaving these here, so you both can be together again. You deserve that. For a moment he just knelt there, breathing slowly, feeling the peace in the air. The birds were quiet, the wind soft, almost reverent. Then Ryan closed his eyes and whispered, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Dad. The word Dad came out naturally this time. No hesitation, no bitterness, just truth. I love you both. Thank you for never giving up on me. The sky began to clear, sunlight breaking through the clouds in thin golden beams, spilling gently across the headstones. It was as if heaven itself was listening. Ryan smiled through his tears, looking up at the sky. You can rest now, he said softly. I'll be okay. He stood up slowly, took one last look at the 2 graves and whispered goodbye, but not forever. Then he turned and walked away, the sound of the breeze following him like a promise kept. Behind him, The two headstones stood side by side, one carved years ago, one freshly made, bound forever by love, loyalty, and a silent promise that had outlived even death. Weeks passed, but something in Ryan had shifted forever. The bitterness that once lived inside him was gone, replaced by a gentle stillness. Every morning he'd wake up early, make coffee in Tom's old chipped mug, and sit by the window, the same way Tom used to. He didn't scroll through his phone anymore. He just watched the sunlight creep across the street, the way Tom probably did for years, quietly holding the world together in silence. One Saturday, Ryan drove down to Tom's old mechanic shop. The bell over the door jingled as he stepped in, and the smell of oil and metal filled his lungs. Everyone there knew him. "Hey, you're Tom's boy, right?" the old foreman called out, wiping his hands on a rag. Ryan smiled faintly. For the first time, the word boy didn't sting. It felt right. "Yeah," he said softly. "I'm his son." The men told him stories, how Tom once stayed after hours to fix a single mother's car for free, how he refused tips, how he'd always talk about Ryan. Said his kid was gonna do something great one day, one of them said. Ryan's throat tightened. "He believed in me more than I ever believed in myself," he whispered. As the weeks went on, Ryan started helping around the shop, not for money, just because it felt like home. He repaired old bikes for neighborhood kids, changed oil for elderly folks who couldn't afford it, and never told anyone why he was doing it. One afternoon he saw a boy sitting on the curb outside the shop, maybe 12, maybe 13, crying quietly. Ryan sat beside him and asked what happened. The boy said his stepdad had yelled at him. Ryan just listened, then said softly, "Sometimes they don't know how to say it right, but they care more than you think." The boy looked at him, confused. "How do you know?" Ryan smiled sadly. "Because I didn't. For a long time, but I do now." He gave the boy a soda from the vending machine, the same brand Tom used to leave on his desk all those years ago. Small gestures, quiet ones, but that's how Tom loved. And now, that's how Ryan did too. That evening, as Ryan locked up the shop, the sunset bathed the sky in soft gold and orange. The same pickup truck Tom drove sat parked nearby, old, rusty, but still running fine. Ryan leaned against it, looking toward the horizon, and whispered, "You're still here, aren't you?" The wind stirred gently in reply, warm and tender. For the first time in his life, Ryan didn't feel alone. He didn't feel lost. He was part of something unspoken, something eternal. Tom's love hadn't ended. It had simply changed hands. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where time seemed to move slower, and even the air felt softer. Ryan sat at his kitchen table, a blank notebook open in front of him, a cup of coffee steaming beside it, the same chipped mug, Tom's mug. He had been thinking about letters a lot lately, the ones his mother wrote, the one Tom left behind, and how each had carried pieces of truth he had once ignored. Now, for the first time, he wanted to write too, not to fix the past, but to honor it. He picked up a pen and began with shaky hands. "Dear Dad." The words still felt new, but warm, like sunlight after rain. "I used to think love had to be loud to be real. I used to think silence meant you didn't care. But I was wrong. You showed me love doesn't always speak. Sometimes it just stays. It works hard. It forgives. It waits." He paused, tears filling his eyes. The ink on the page blurred slightly. "You never gave up on me, even when I gave up on you. You kept showing up. For birthdays I didn't invite you to. For graduations where you stood in the back. For every small thankless moment I never noticed. You stayed, and that's love." He took a deep breath, looking at the old photo of Tom and his mom on the counter, her smiling, his hand gently on her shoulder. The quiet strength in his eyes suddenly made sense. Ryan turned the page and began another letter. "Dear Mom, I get it now. You chose him because he was steady, not perfect, because he loved me when he didn't have to. You were right about him, and about love. It's not about who shouts the loudest, it's about who stays the longest." He smiled faintly as he wrote, his handwriting calmer now. And then, almost instinctively, he began a third letter, this one without a name. "To the person I'll love one day, I hope I love you the way he loved her. Quietly, faithfully, without needing anything in return. I hope I learn to forgive faster, to listen better, and to stay when it's hard, because that's what real love looks like." When he finished, he stacked the letters neatly, tied them with a small string, and placed them in Tom's old toolbox. The same one that had held the first letter he'd ever found. It felt right. A circle. Complete. That evening, he drove out to the lake, the same one he and Tom used to fish at when he was a boy. The water shimmered with the colors of the setting sun, golden and still. Ryan whispered softly, "You taught me everything without saying much at all." The breeze brushed against his face, gentle and warm, as if someone was listening. For the first time, Ryan wasn't haunted by what he lost. He was guided by what he gained. Love, patience, forgiveness, and the quiet kind of strength that lasts forever. As the last light faded, he said quietly, "Thank you, Dad, for teaching me how to love, not with words, but with presence." The lake reflected the sky's last glow, and in that glow, Ryan found peace, not in the end of the story, but in the beginning of a new one. 15 years had passed. The small town hadn't changed much. The same quiet streets, the same rusted water tower, the same breeze that carried old memories. But Ryan Miller wasn't the same man anymore. He stood on the porch of his home, watching the golden light of sunset stretch across his backyard. A small boy, about 10 years old, was sitting on the grass, frowning at a fishing pole tangled in its own line. "Need some help there, champ?" Ryan asked, smiling as he walked down the steps. The boy looked up, frustrated. "It's all messed up, Dad." Ryan knelt beside him, gently untangling the line with patient fingers. "You know," he said softly, "my dad used to say, you don't learn patience from things that come easy." The boy glanced up curiously. "You mean Grandpa Tom?" Ryan paused for a second, then smiled. That quiet, warm kind of smile Tom once had. "Yeah," he said, his voice low and proud. "Grandpa Tom." The boy's eyes brightened. "Can you tell me a story about him again?" Ryan chuckled. "Didn't I already tell you 100? One more," the boy insisted. So Ryan sat back on the grass, the evening light turning soft orange around them. He wasn't loud, you know. He didn't talk much, but he showed love in small ways, like fixing things no one noticed were broken, staying up late just to make sure you got home safe. He loved quietly, but it was the loudest kind of love there is. The boy listened closely, eyes wide, as if each word painted a picture. Ryan handed him the fixed fishing pole. "There," he said. "Now, let's see what you can catch." The boy grinned and ran to the lake behind the house. The same lake Ryan once visited as a boy, the same waters that had reflected his pain, and now his peace. Ryan watched him cast the line, clumsy but eager. He felt a lump in his throat as he whispered under his breath, "He'd be proud of you, Tom. He really would." A soft breeze swept across the lake, rippling the water gently. The setting sun glowed brighter for a moment, and Ryan smiled, closing his eyes. Later that night, when his son was asleep, Ryan walked into his study and opened an old wooden box on the shelf, Tom's toolbox. Inside were the same 3 letters he had written years ago. He read them again, not with tears this time, but with a full heart. Then he added a 4th. "Dear son, someday you'll wonder why I always smiled when things got hard, why I stayed patient when life got messy. When you do, remember this. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. That's what your grandpa taught me. And now I'm passing it to you." He folded the letter, placed it gently with the others, and closed the box. As he turned off the light and looked out the window, the moon reflected softly on the lake. In that silver glow, he could almost see them, Tom and his mother, standing hand in hand, smiling. Ryan whispered, "The promise lives on." And with that, the story came full circle. Not an ending, but a legacy. The quiet kind of love that would echo through generations, as gentle and unbreakable as the wind that carried it. Moral lesson: true love doesn't always speak in grand words. Sometimes it lives in quiet actions, in sacrifices no one sees, and in the patience to stay when it's hardest. Ryan's journey teaches us that family is not only made by blood, but by the love, care, and silent promises we keep. We learn that forgiveness can heal years of distance, gratitude can turn pain into peace, and the people who love us most often show it in the smallest, simplest way.